In an age when Viking jarls ruled with iron fists and gold outweighed honor, one outlaw became more feared than any king. He stole from the richest raiders only to give everything away. Some called him a criminal. Others whispered he was Odin's chosen.
His name was Eric Wolfhand, a name spoken only in whispers, for fear that the wrong ears might hear. To the Jarls, he was a dangerous outlaw, a thief who dared challenge their power. To the poor, he was something far greater. A guardian who appeared like a shadow in the night, leaving behind food, silver, and hope where despair had taken root. Some claimed he was merely a man. Others believed Odin himself had cloaked him in the spirit of the wolf. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: the North would never forget the legend of Eirik Wolfhand. Long before kings feared his name, before silver flowed from the hands of the rich into the empty bowls of the poor, Eric Wolfhand was just a boy. He wasn't born beneath a crown, nor was he destined for greatness. He came from a tiny fishing village hidden deep within Norway's frozen fjords, a place so isolated that even seasoned raiders rarely found it. There, life wasn't measured by the gold you owned, but by the strength of your word, the warmth of your fire, and whether your neighbor survived the winter. It was a peaceful world, but peace has a way of attracting men who hunger for power. And far beyond the mountains, someone had already set his eyes on Eric's home.
Every dawn began the same way. Before the fishing nets were cast, before the village stirred awake, Eirik's father led him to a quiet clearing overlooking the fjord. There, with nothing more than a wooden axe and a weathered shield, he taught his son lessons no king could ever buy. Strength may win a battle, he would say, but honor is what wins a lifetime. Every strike carried a purpose. Every mistake became a lesson. Yet his greatest teaching had nothing to do with fighting at all. One day, his father whispered, "You will face men who wear fine cloaks and call themselves leaders. Judge them not by the gold they carry, but by the people they leave hungry." Eirik never forgot those words, though he had no idea how soon they would be tested.
As the seasons turned, the village lived by a single promise: no one would face the winter alone. When the fishermen returned with overflowing nets, every family received a share. When the hunters brought down an elk, the meat was divided before the feast began. If a roof collapsed beneath the weight of snow, every able hand came to rebuild it before sunset. In this forgotten corner of the North, wealth wasn't measured by the silver in your pouch, but by the number of lives your kindness could save. It was a way of life older than kings, stronger than fear, and richer than any treasure hidden beneath the sea. But while the villagers celebrated another peaceful harvest, beyond the mountains, a ruthless pair of eyes was already watching, and with every passing day, the shadow crept closer. His name was Jarl Sigvard, and wherever his long ships touched the shore, hope died before the first sword was drawn. He did not conquer villages to protect them. He conquered them to own them. His warriors wore polished mail. His banners bore the black wolf of his house, and his reputation traveled faster than the wind. Entire settlements surrendered at the mere sight of his fleet appearing through the morning mist. Those who obeyed lost everything they had worked for.
Those who resisted lost far more. As the people of Eric's village celebrated another day of peace, no one noticed the dark sails rising beyond the fjord. By the time the first lookout sounded the horn, it was already too late. The raid everyone feared never came. There were no burning homes, no clashing shields, no rivers of blood. Instead, Jarl Sigvard offered the village a choice that was no choice at all. "Pay my tribute," he declared, "or lose everything." His warriors moved from house to house, taking sacks of grain, smoked fish, livestock, tools, and even the silver wedding rings from trembling hands. Mothers watched their children's winter food disappear into the Jarl's wagons. Elderly men surrendered the heirlooms their fathers had carried across the sea. Every home was stripped bare, yet Sigvard demanded more. To him, the village wasn't a community. It was a treasure chest waiting to be emptied. And standing silently beside his father, young Eric witnessed something he would never forget. The day greed became more terrifying than war. At first, people believed the worst had passed. They told themselves that if they worked harder, if they caught more fish, if they survived one more winter, perhaps the Jarl would finally be satisfied. But tyrants are never satisfied. Days turned into weeks, and a terrifying pattern emerged. Anyone who questioned the tribute vanished without a trace. The blacksmith who refused to surrender his tools disappeared before sunrise. A widow who begged to keep food for her children was dragged away into the night. A fisherman who dared to speak against the Jarl was never seen again. Soon, silence became the village's only defense. Doors stayed shut. Conversations became whispers. Even the laughter of children faded beneath the weight of fear. Yet among all those lowered heads, one man still stood unbroken, and his name was Leif, Eric's father. Fear had conquered the village, but it could not conquer every heart. On the morning Jarl Sigvard returned to collect yet another tribute, the villagers lowered their eyes and surrendered what little they had left. One by one, they stepped forward in silence. Then, the line stopped. Leif, Eric's father, walked into the center of the village square with nothing in his hands except his dignity. He looked the Jarl straight in the eyes and spoke words no one else dared to utter. A leader who steals from hungry children is no leader at all. The village fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Sigvard's warriors tightened their grip on their weapons, waiting for the order. Young Eric watched from the crowd, his heart pounding louder than the village bell. In that single moment, he realized that true courage was not the absence of fear, it was the decision to stand when everyone else had already fallen to their knees. But courage has a price, and before the sun would set, life would pay it in full. Jarl Sigvard did not shout. He did not argue. A cruel smile slowly spread across his face. The smile of a man who believed fear was stronger than justice. Let every soul here witness what becomes of those who mistake courage for power, he said, his voice echoing across the silent square. Two warriors seized Leif and forced him to his knees. The villagers stood frozen, too frightened to move, too broken to speak. Young Eric struggled against the hands that held him back, desperate to reach his father. Then Leif turned, not to the Jarl, but to his son. Through the falling snow, their eyes met one last time. There was no fear in Leif's face, only pride. "Never let them steal your honor," he called. "A man can lose his home, his freedom, even his life. But if he keeps his honor, he is never truly defeated." The square fell deathly silent. A single raven cried overhead. Then, with one swift command from Sigvard, Leif's fate was sealed. As the villagers lowered their heads in grief, something else was born that day. Not vengeance, but a promise. A promise that one day the tyrant who ruled through fear would answer to the boy who had witnessed it all.
Winter swallowed the footprints behind him. No one called his name. No one came searching through the endless pines. The village believed the boy had been claimed by the cold, just another life lost beneath the snow. But the forest had chosen a different fate. Alone beneath towering evergreens, Eirik learned that the wilderness showed no mercy. Hunger gnawed at him. Ice numbed his hands. Every sunrise was earned, and every night survived was another victory. He drank from frozen streams, gathered what little food the land would offer, and sheltered beneath ancient rocks as blizzards roared across the mountains. Then, one bitter evening, he realized he was not alone. A great gray wolf emerged silently between the trees, its pale eyes fixed upon the frightened boy. Neither moved, neither looked away. In that frozen moment, two survivors recognized the same unbroken spirit. The wolf turned and disappeared into the forest. Eirik followed. From that night forward, he no longer feared the wilderness. He learned its hidden paths, its silent language, and its unforgiving laws. The frightened child the village once knew slowly vanished beneath snow, hardship, and determination. Something stronger was taking his place. Not a prince, not a warrior, but a shadow the powerful would one day learn to fear.
By the time the first light of dawn touched the mountains, Eric was gone. Behind him lay a village filled with sorrow. Ahead of him stretched a wilderness so vast that even the bravest hunters feared to enter it. With nothing but his father's woodcutter's axe, a worn wolf pendant, and the words, "Never let them steal your honor," echoing in his mind, he stepped into the frozen forest alone. The north showed him no mercy. Hunger became his constant companion. Bitter winds cut through his clothes, and every night the distant howl of wolves reminded him that one mistake could be his last. Yet, with each passing day, the frightened boy grew stronger. He learned to follow the tracks of deer through fresh snow, to catch fish beneath thick sheets of ice, and to build hidden shelters beneath ancient pine trees where no soldier could ever find him. The forest was no longer his enemy. It was becoming his teacher. Every scar, every frozen night, and every hard-earned meal shaped him into something new. The boy who had fled in grief was slowly disappearing. In his place, a survivor was being born. But Eric had no idea that he was not alone in those endless woods, and that before long, fate would lead him to others who carried the same wounds. For weeks, Eric believed he was the last soul wandering the frozen wilderness. Every footprint in the snow could have belonged to a hunter or to one of Jarl Sigvard's men. Trust had become as rare as food. Then, one quiet afternoon, he noticed something unusual. Fresh tracks. They were too small for a deer, too careful for a wolf. Someone else was out there.
Following the trail through the towering pines, Eirik found not an enemy, but a starving young man hiding beneath a fallen tree. His clothes were torn, his hands shook from hunger, and fear filled his eyes. He was an escaped thrall who had fled the Jarl's cruelty, expecting nothing but another cruel master. Instead of raising his axe, Eirik slowly reached into his satchel and offered the stranger his last piece of bread. The young man stared in disbelief. No one had shown him kindness in years. He accepted the bread with trembling hands, and in that silent moment, something far greater than a meal was shared. It was hope. Word travels strangely through the wilderness. Before long, others began to appear. Hunters driven from their homes, widows with nowhere to go, and warriors who had refused to serve a tyrant. They came not because Eirik promised riches or glory, but because they had heard of a boy who shared his last meal with a stranger. Without realizing it, Eirik had taken the first step toward building something that fear could never destroy.
By the time winter's deepest snows blanketed the mountains, Eirik's lonely camp was no longer empty. The fire that had once warmed a single traveler now burned at the heart of a growing family. Around it sat escaped thralls, widows, hunters, blacksmiths, fishermen, and warriors who had refused to kneel before Jarl Sigvard. Each had lost something to the tyrant. Yet, for the first time in years, they were no longer alone. As the flames crackled beneath the dancing northern lights, silence settled over the camp. Every eye turned toward the young boy who had unknowingly become their leader. Eirik slowly stood, resting both hands on his father's old woodcutter's axe. For a moment, he looked into every face around the fire, not as strangers, but as people worth protecting. "If we fight only for revenge," he said quietly, "we will become the very thing we hate. But if we fight for those who cannot defend themselves, then no tyrant will ever truly defeat us." He drew a small knife and carved the shape of a wolf into an ancient tree stump beside the fire. One by one, each survivor stepped forward, placing a hand upon the carving. No crowns were worn, no gold was exchanged, no titles were given. Only a single promise echoed through the frozen forest. "We will take only from those who steal from others. We will feed the hungry. We will protect the weak. We will stand together or fall together." The wind carried their voices through the towering pines as if the mountains themselves had heard the oath. On that cold winter night, a legend was born. Not of kings or conquerors, but of ordinary people who chose courage over fear. From that moment on, they would be known by a name that would soon spread across every fjord and village in Norway: the Wolf Brotherhood. Far away, inside his warm hall, Jarl Sigvard still believed the forests belonged only to wolves. He had no idea that a different kind of wolf had just begun to hunt. The very next morning, before the first rays of sunlight reached the valley below, the Wolf Brotherhood was already on the move. Hidden beneath thick pine branches and drifting snow, they watched a long line of wagons winding through the mountain pass. It wasn't carrying weapons or warriors. It was carrying something far more valuable: food, silver, and furs taken from the very villages Jarl Sigvard had left to starve. Most men would have rushed into battle with axes raised. Eirik chose a different path. Every step of the plan had been carefully prepared. Scouts mapped every trail. Hunters marked the safest escape routes.
Ropes were hidden beneath the snow, and silent signals passed from tree to tree. The Brotherhood wasn't fighting with strength alone. They were fighting with patience. As the lead wagon rolled between two towering pines, Jarl raised his hand. The forest became perfectly still. Then, with a single whistle, the trap was sprung. Thick ropes snapped tight across the trail. Horses reared in surprise, and startled guards stumbled into deep snow. Before they could understand what was happening, shadowy figures emerged from the forest, moving with remarkable speed. Not a single innocent life was taken. The guards were disarmed, their weapons gathered, and they were left unharmed in the snow. Every sack of grain, every barrel of dried fish, every bundle of winter clothing, and every pouch of silver was loaded onto waiting sleds. Before disappearing into the forest, Jarl carved a single wolf's head into the side of the lead wagon. It wasn't a threat. It was a message. The people of the North would soon learn that someone had begun returning what tyranny had stolen. And for the first time in years, fear had changed sides.
Before the first rooster crowed, before smoke rose from a single chimney, the Wolf Brotherhood had already disappeared into the silent valleys. Under the cover of darkness, they traveled from one forgotten village to another, pulling sleds heavy with grain, dried fish, warm blankets, and firewood. The very supplies Jarl Sigvard had stolen only days before. There were no speeches, no celebrations, no demands for praise. At every doorstep, Eric left the gifts in silence before slipping back into the shadows. A sack of grain outside a widow's home, warm furs beside an old fisherman who could no longer work, fresh bread for children who had gone to sleep hungry. By sunrise, the Brotherhood was already gone, leaving behind only footprints in the snow and a small wooden carving of a wolf. As the villages slowly awoke, confusion turned to disbelief. Doors opened one by one. Mothers clutched their children as they found food waiting outside. Elderly couples wept as they lifted heavy sacks they could never have carried themselves. No one knew who had come during the night, only that someone had remembered them when the world had forgotten. Soon, whispers spread from one fjord to the next. Some believed it was Odin rewarding the faithful. Others claimed the forest spirits had taken pity on the poor. But those who looked closely always found the same mark, a simple wolf carved into the wood. For the first time in years, hope traveled faster than fear. And somewhere beyond the mountains, Jarl Sigvard was about to discover that stealing from the poor had created an enemy he could neither see nor control.
Every legend begins with a single act of courage, and this is only the beginning. Eirik may have won his first victory, but the greatest battles still lie ahead. Jarl Sigvard is no longer hunting a boy. He is hunting a legend, and legends are far more dangerous than swords. In Season 2, loyalties will be tested, secrets will be revealed, impossible choices will be made, and the fate of the Wolf Brotherhood will hang by a thread. Now, it's your turn. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Leave a comment below. If you lived in Viking Norway, would you join Eirik's Wolf Brotherhood or stand with Jarl Sigvard? Tell us why. And don't forget to share this video with fellow lovers of Viking legends and epic adventures. Remember, this was only the first hunt. The real war begins in Season 2. Until next time, keep your honor strong, your courage alive, and watch out for what happens next. The Wolf Brotherhood's greatest challenge is yet to come.